Hey, how's it going, everybody? Yoshi the Oreo here. So, today's video. I know later, like a couple of weeks ago, or like a week ago, I made a post talking about how I was going to come out with a 1 hour video about like putting the anti-lollies in their place and everything. Scrap that because I actually sat down and gave it some thought, and honestly, I kind of realized I was overthinking a lot of things and I didn't need to come out like with a 1 hour video about that. So I decided to do a video like this that's just definitive to the point to where not only am I clapping the anti-lolly coalition, but I'm also clapping the lolly side as well. Because if you've been a fan of mine, if you've been watching my videos, you ultimately understand I don't take sides with black people. I don't take sides with white people. I'm in the competition of dicking you both down, regardless if I get consent or not. Because the consent was competition. You already consented, so your ass is already available. Like, you all know my criticisms with the anti-lolly side, but I honestly have like a real bigger issue with the pro-lolly side. And my bigger issue with the pro-lolly side is that their explanation is on the same level as a kindergartner, if not is on the same level as like an anti-lolly, because it is, therefore it is. But for the pro lolly side, because it's not, therefore it's not. It's kind of like in the same. It's kind of like the same explanation. Like, have you ever like watched debates between like flat earthers and people who believe that the Earth is not flat? Like, the person that believes the Earth is round would just simply say, well, the Earth is round because look at the globe, it's round. So because the globe is round, the Earth is round. I mean, to those who automatically agree with you, yes, you're right. However, to a flat earther who doesn't agree with you, that's a retarded explanation. And to either side, they're both retarded explanations. If you don't kind of sit there and think about it for a second, don't drag the conversation into it's not real. It's not a real argument. Drag the conversation into more of a philosophical understanding. And instead of arguing with it's not real, argue with where is the violation of bodily autonomy present upon the citizen. Put the burden of proof on the accuser, not on yourself, because they don't care with what you come up with. However, they don't have necessarily a good explanation in terms of philosophy, because I've had a number of arguments with people within anti-lolly videos, and I've noticed under no circumstances none of them can engage in intellectual complexity because their influencers don't train them to think, they train them to react. Don't shut them down with your own logic because they don't abide by your logic. Shut them down with the fact that they don't have a logic, because their logic is prone to the idea of violating a person's bodily autonomy, not on the evidence that one's bodily autonomy or a child's bodily autonomy was violated through the sexual act. They don't care about that. They care about the appearance of possibly being attracted. They only care about the attraction, not the act. The attraction to them is the proof to murder you. Like, let's use an example of something else similar to the effect. Does a person reading the book Mein Kampf automatically makes them a white supremacist? No. But the reading of Mein Kampf is the proof to murder. Just like how the reading of Lolly is the reason to murder. But then the question becomes, who has the right to pass judgment on those who read Mein Kampf? The person that believes it or the person that doesn't believe it? Because they both read it. And what happens is we create an atmosphere where the person who reads it but ultimately believes it has the possibility of invading that cultural institution to pass judgment on those who read it and does not believe it. It kind of goes back to that old saying within, well, it's not really an old saying, but it's a question within the whole Christian versus Muslim debate, where you have a peaceful Muslim that wants to escape the Middle East, they want to escape the Islamic culture, and they say that they come in peace. And you have an Islamic extremist who believes in conquest. They believe in invading the Western society, but they believe in conquering Western societies, and they believe once they've conquered the Western society that they're entitled to your women and children, and they can do whatever the hell they want to them in terms of making them sex slaves or just outright killing them. They too come into your country saying, I come in peace. So then the question then becomes, how do you tell the difference? You tell the difference by understanding the culture and by understanding who puts into practice of the culture while saying that they come in peace, which means they denounce the culture. So if a Muslim says that they come in peace, they are ultimately saying, I denounce the culture that I come from. But they're coming into our culture and they're bringing their culture into our culture. That's not a peaceful Muslim. That's not an ex-Muslim, because an ex-Muslim is a peaceful Muslim. That Muslim is a Muslim extremist. That is a sleeper unit. And going back to the white nationalist example, how you can tell a person who read Mein Kampf and ultimately reads and believes Mein Kampf is ultimately if they put the ideas of Mein Kampf into practice, into praxis. And what is that practice? That practice is the demonization of democracy. Demonize everything and anything around you that does not support the white cause. But anything that supports the white cause in terms of pure genetic white on white to produce more white children with an emphasis on demonizing race mixing is a sign of a true white nationalist that ultimately believes in white nationalism. Okay, and what about lolly? Well, those who are otakus, you have to understand the culture of an otaku. What is the culture of an otaku? The culture of an otaku is different from the culture of an Islamic extremist or a white nationalist. Those two examples says you will support our cause, and if you don't support it, die. Otakus don't operate like that. Otakus are people destined by society that you don't really amount to anything. You're a reject of society. So you go into your own little pocket. You made your own little pocket. You made your own little culture. You feel accepted there. And you have your own little niche with other people that ultimately agree with the niche. And you just mingle with those people and those people only. And everybody else, especially in terms of anime becoming mainstream, I think a lot of people are now starting to notice the side effects of what happens when anime becomes mainstream. You have a lot of normies coming in that don't really understand the media that they're reading, and then you have a large example of media illiteracy within the space. And otakus are more prone to just telling you to get the hell out of our space because you don't understand what the hell it is, and we don't want you here. The space operates without you here. In terms of Islamic and white nationalist oppression and authoritarianism, totalitarianism, it requires those people to be in the space because they want to put those people into forced labor to build and construct and take advantage of their labor and to reap the benefits without having to do the work themselves. So to put it in short term, put the onus on the idiot making the claim that lolly is CP. Put it on them to find the violation of bodily autonomy, not to prove rather if it's real or not. Put them in a scenario, because their whole process is the obfuscation of bodily autonomy. They don't care about bodily autonomy. Their process quite literally screams, we don't care about bodily autonomy. We look for anything and everything that allows us to give us a justification to kill you. So don't get into full-scale arguments with these people about that, because they don't care. Again, try to form some kind of question that says, if this is the case, find the violation of bodily autonomy upon the citizen and show that to me, and I'll work with you. 10 times out of 10, they can't work with you because they don't think that far. So again, for the love of God, stop using the "it's not real" argument. I understand those who actually agree with you will agree with you. Even I agree with you on that. But in terms against those who don't agree with that, that argument does not work. Like, honestly, we can sit here and talk about philosophy and everything else and all that, yada, yada, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's kind of a losing battleground. So instead, I think a real closing argument would be something more along of asking a question to the anti-lolly side and making them think about what they're actually doing, because they don't understand what they're doing. And essentially pointing the gun at their head and making them think about it. I'm not talking about like actually pointing a gun at their head, you pointing a gun at their head, but rather the state's gun at their head, and then asking them this very important question that's going to kind of make them sit there and think about it. And this is my question to you, the Anti-Lolly Coalition. If Lolly is CP, and you've been looking it up this entire time, you've been doing research, why should the government not shoot you for looking up CP? Because, I kind of sat there and thought about it for a little bit. I don't think a lot of people are evil. I honestly do believe, like, there are some people within the Anti-Lolly Coalition that are kind of genuinely concerned. I can understand that. Because if you kind of sit down and think about it for a little bit, you have to really think about it. You have to ask yourself this question: what type of dichotomy are we living in terms of this discussion? I'll show you in terms of a chart. To most people, the dichotomy in the discussion of Lolly is quite literally under the friend-enemy distinction, where all the good guys are over here and all the bad guys over here, vice versa. And because we're the good guys, therefore we're the ones with the moral superiority, and that we're morally more superior than the other people on the other side of the political spectrum. And because of that, all the bad guys are over there, therefore you shouldn't listen to them, you should only listen to us. Which at that point effectively makes both sides cults at that point, because they're both kind of doing like the whole isolation kind of thing. Not all of them per se, but there are some of them that do that kind of cult isolation type of thing, where it's like, don't listen to them because they're the bad guys. You can only listen to us. We're the good guys, and we're the only ones that tells the truth. Or do we live in this type of dichotomy? So if you're familiar with someone by the name of Leon Trotsky, he was a person who coined the term Entrianism, which is now known today as more of a left-wing form of infiltration, in terms of infiltrating the culture or infiltrating government institutions to skew them from a more neutral or more American or nation type of thinking to a more left-wing ideology kind of thinking, to the point to where it only levies the laws towards any of its political opponents, but anyone within the thought bubble and in the echo chambers of leftism are given all the privileges of not being punished by the system. And this is where I'm extending an olive branch to those in the Anti-Lolly Coalition, who ultimately, I'm pretty sure you and I can both agree, we do not want to live in a system where our judicial system is levying crimes against children purely against their political opponents, but at the exact same time, those who wear their political coat and speak their political language are exempt from the cudgel of the judicial system and are then exempt from the punishments. And I think any person who is perfectly fine with those exemptions in our judicial system should completely be excluded from this conversation. Because again, look at the chart. We're not in a dichotomy where all the good people are on one side and all the bad people are on the other side. No, we're in an economy where there are good people on both sides. The problem is both sides have been infiltrated and are being ran by pedophiles. And then the problem becomes even a lot harder for those who don't take a step outside the box. And that box is in the center with the lolly and anti-lollies, where they don't take a step outside that box and see the forest for the trees and see that they're ultimately surrounded by the enemy, because the enemy has learned your language and they've learned to copy your language, and then in the form that they end up getting attacked because you fall into the friend enemy distinction. You fall into a psychological pattern to defend those who wear your language. So when you look at this chart, that diamond in the center gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and the outer layers of that diamond become blacker and blacker and blacker, because both sides keep doing this thing where they'll look at the outer side and say, you know, here's an example of this group doing evil things. So because this individual is doing evil things, it is representative of the entire group. And it's this constant back and forth between these two groups, because no one like by human nature, no one likes feeling attacked. So what happens is when they feel attacked, they start to form groups where they identify each other based on the language that they speak. And the problem is the people behind you look like your allies, and you spend more time focusing on the people on the other side and less time about the people behind you. And this chart is also representative not only within like the anime space, it's also representative in terms of like any type of oppressed versus oppressor type of dichotomy, where it's whites versus blacks, men versus women, straights versus gays, left wing versus right wing. You can replace these two categories and it's pretty much the same outcome with the same outcomes in conclusions. It's just to generate confusion so you attack each other. And the only people who benefit from this are the actual pedophiles and neo-Nazis. Because an attack on them is an attack on you. And you don't like being attacked, right? Okay, so if you don't like being attacked, join them. And every time you hear someone saying that they're a pedophile or a neo-Nazi, just disregard that. We're the good guys and they're the bad guys. And despite the fact that they do hold those views, we have to work together. No enemies to the right, just like how there's no enemies to the left of you. And I wasn't really aware of this, but yes, lolly guys, we do have a real issue within the community. And I'm not talking about in terms of pedophilia. I'm talking about in terms of like actual anti-Semitic libelism within the anime community. Namely, I went online to look at like certain examples. Like we do have this within our community where people will staunchly defend lolly, but then they'll say, this person who happens to be a Jew is also like part of the Jewish conspiracy cabal using actual pornography to weaken the white Western man in controlling and to wiping out the white race. Just like how in the anti-lolly side, you even have examples of those being purely anti-lolly, but quite literally having a history or a record of being on sex offenders list, or quite literally violating or raping some other people's bodily autonomy, violating their bodily autonomy, while also going around condemning those into lolly to being exactly like them, but for some reason they never reach the spaces within the black spaces behind the inner diamond. They always attack the inner diamond, but they never attack outside of the diamond because they're two sides of the same coin. Despite being on opposite sides, they work in tangent, knowing that if they attack the other side, then they lose their cover. Or if they attack, well, not attack the other side, they lose the cover, but if they attack too deep into the other side, then their cover is exposed. Then it will cause self-reflection within the group to look behind them. So if any person within the anti-Lolly coalition ultimately understands and agrees that they do not want to live in a system that only persecutes their political opponents, but any pedophile that loves their language or political ideology or any other type of ideology in terms of like atheism or Marxism or socialism or national socialism or communism are exempt from their legislative laws of being pedophiles. If you agree with me that you don't want to live in a society like that where your people are exempt because they speak that language, but they are pedophiles, I can work with you. And I think a lot of people within the pro-Lolly side should also work in tangent with those people as well. And, you know, the same thing goes for Christians, you know. It's the same thing in terms of the diagram, you know. The people in the inner diamond, they do call out Christians who are accused of those crimes and they are guilty of those crimes. They do call them out. There are Christians that do call out people like Andrew Tate and them. But those who are Christians, quote unquote, they won't call out people like Andrew Tate. They won't call out people like Nick Fuentes. They won't call out people like Myron Gaines because, well, they speak the language that they're so synonymous to, which is white ethno-nationalism with a tinge of closeted gayness. And in terms of harmful opinions, I'm pretty sure you're quite aware of like people like Andrew Tate. And in terms of those type of Christians, I think you and I can work together against people like that. But it's going to require you cleaning up your lens because I don't think you can tell the difference between someone like Charlie Kirk and Nick Fuentes, or in this case, David Wood and Andrew Tate. You kind of see them in the same lens. Like, I ultimately understand there are people who use Christianity as a means to just grift and to quote unquote absolve themselves of their past sins and to make money off of that and to shield their identities and stuff like that. I understand that. I think the problem is a lot of people, when they really don't understand that dialecticism, the lines blur and they kind of look like the same person. So David Wood is Andrew Tate and Andrew Tate is David Wood, when that's not really the case. Like, in order for you to actually see through this bullshit and without falling into the dialectical trap, you have to understand the culture. You can't be like this person that sees the culture on, you know, face value and be like, I know the answers, I know exactly how to deal with the culture, and anyone disagrees with me, well, we just shut them off and like fucking throw them in a wood chipper or some shit. That doesn't necessarily show intellectual complexity, that just shows a sign of totalitarianism and cowardliness. Like, honestly, at first I was about to come out with like that 1 hour video or something like that. I was about to explain Lolly is perfectly fine in an economical scale and a philosophical scale. I already explained it on the philosophical scale. And just so you know, I'm more of the inner diamond. I'm not in the outer diamond. Because, you know, there are some people that will take that talking point, right? It's not real. And then they will look at like actual porn and say, well, the Jews control porn and they're trying to weaken the white man and it's connected to pedophilia and all this kind of stuff. But for some reason, Lolly is like perfectly fine with them. But if you actually want to know my reasoning on an economical scale, it can't really be considered the same, especially considering the fact Lolly only generates an annual income of like $5 to $10 million annually. Actual CSAM of children being sexually assaulted is a multi-billion-dollar illegal industry. They're not the same. It's like when you look at it economically, they're saying the niche within the niche that makes the least amount of money is on the same economical scale as a multi-billion-dollar illegal industry. Make that make sense. And if lollies should be considered as CP, then why aren't the people who are involved in Epstein not putting their money behind it? If that was the case, then they would put their money and investment behind it, and it would be ultimately protected by the government. But as far as I'm concerned, the government doesn't want to solve real issues because real issue requires billions and billions of their own money to be able to tackle actual real issues that are worth billions upon billions of dollars. And when you look at it economically, the only reason why they're tackling the lolly issue is because it's economically cheaper. And it actually protects their actual investments in terms of child trafficking. But yeah, honestly, I don't need to really make that long of a video. But yeah, it's a stupid conversation. And don't let those people drag into those conversations. Just learn how to be very direct with putting them the burden of proof to actually prove their case, to the point to where if it is considered law, why should they be exempt from the persecutions of their own research? Let them explain why they shouldn't be thrown in the jail for researching CP. Because it kind of reminds me of like what happened on Twitter back when it was actually owned by Jack Dorsey. Like the leftists thought, they kept pushing for more policy for them to like politically silence the conservatives. And as soon as Jack had everything that they wanted and they no longer needed those people, and all of a sudden, all those policies that they started pushing on the conservatives started immediately being pushed on the leftists and Antifa cells that were promoting terrorism. And they were wondering, why were they being affected? Because you're dumb enough to think that under no circumstances what you're advocating for your political opponents are somehow not going to affect you. Well, that's it for this video, guys. Leave a like, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Until again, I can speak. Trust me, I can speak. Until then, take care and be safe, and I will see you guys in the next video. God bless.